Okay, hello everybody. Today I'm super excited that Ijoma will be joining us. And before we get started, I'm going to cover a couple of housekeeping things. The session will be recorded. Hey Billy, how's it going? You joined right in time for the housekeeping. So I'm just saying that the session's going to be recorded, so if you don't want your shining face on the recording, please turn off your video. Also be sure to mute during the session because we don't want any background noise. And finally, if questions do pop up during the session, please add them in the Q&A box so Ijoma can address them afterwards. So without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce Ijoma Eke, who is a product advocate and Jira specialist. She offers advice, best practices, and resources to help evaluators get started with Atlassian solutions. And in addition to her impressive professional background, she's also a loving dog mother to OG and Penny. Penny can be pictured in the corner, who I'm sure are loving all the family time they're getting during quarantine. So
they really are.
Over to you, Ijoma. Take it away.
Hi. All right, let's use Zoom. Let's see. Okay. All right, can you see everything just fine?
Perfectly.
All right. So, I'm Ijoma, and I'm a product advocate with Atlassian. As a product advocate, I have the pleasure of providing advice to new and prospective Atlassian customers who are interested in Jira software and also other products in our ecosystem. Welcome to Organize #AllTheThings, structuring your work in Jira. So many people have used our solutions in the past and have come back to us when they realize that Jira software might be the special sauce that they need in a new work situation. And one thing I love to hear from them are questions about whether or not the way they've worked in the past can map to their new use case and needs. They might think that Jira software has the capabilities that they're looking for, but they're not sure because they haven't used all of them. I love these questions because it really means that our customers get it. Jira software is expansive and it's versatile. The way that you've used it in the past may not be the right way to use Jira software in a new situation, but there are so many ways to use Jira software. We have tutorials and guides to walk you through its features, and we're always delivering new blogs and articles that discuss the upcoming features, best practices, etc. But it isn't always easy to know when those best practices apply to your situation. And the other thing is that once you've learned how to use Jira software in one way, it's possible to forget that you customized Jira software to work that way in the first place. So before you can leverage our software in a new situation, you got to kind of step out of your context box. And I recommend asking yourself these 3 very basic questions to help you get started with that. How should I organize my work in Jira? How do I model this particular team in Jira's processes? And I might be able to use this right now, but should I? Is it the right tool for my current needs, or is it just the one that I'm used to using? I have a lot of advice that can help you get to the answers of these questions, but you do have to answer these questions for yourself before my advice can really be effective, because one does not simply start working in Jira. Jumping in without a plan or a specific direction for what you want to do with the software can make Jira's robust functionality into a confusing obstacle between you and its potential value. My goal with this talk is to give you some best practices for organizing your work in Jira and strategies that will help you thoroughly answer those questions for yourself. Some of my advice will be broadly applicable strategy, and some of it will pertain to specific features or situations. Once you have gotten the thorough answers to those questions, though, these best practices will really be able to go the distance for your team, regardless of whether or not you're a Jira veteran or if you're getting started with our software for the first time. So, first strategy that I suggest is that you consider a 3-stage process when organizing your team and your work into your software. You're going to start by planning it all out, and then you'll move on to using that plan to translate your work and your team into Jira software. After you've done that, then you can start tracking your work. So first things first, Jira software is not just a tool, it is a package of project tracking tools. It has integrations, issue tracking, project management functions, etc., like boards and backlogs. You can use all of these or just some of them to facilitate your work. The first thing you should do before starting out in Jira, though, is to consider the basics. In my opinion, the most basic aspect of Jira software that you should be aware of is that it revolves around projects. A Jira project is just a categorization of work that you can assign specific configuration to. But what does that mean for you? And this is a weird thing to say, but what it means is that you get to decide what that means. Projects can represent all of the work being done for a particular client. They could represent or encapsulate all of the work being done by a small team. Or they could represent large teams of teams or a department. You also have the option of translating your projects directly as Jira projects. But remember, a single Jira project is not going to adequately represent your work or your team unless you've got a single small team working in Jira towards a particular goal. So think about it before you decide the number of projects that you're going to use. Now, as an example, here are 2 concept menus from an imaginary potato-based bistro that I have called Potatoes on a Table, because that's what it is. The owners of Potatoes on a Table are piloting 2 menus to see which one encourages orders the fastest. The menu on the left is simple and straightforward. It's got only a few options. The menu on the right is elaborate and full of choices. Which of these menus is it easier to order from? Out of box, Jira software is absolutely the menu on the right. While this menu looks delicious, it can be a bit intimidating to order from it when you only just learned that almond cheese exists. Just as the important decision between mashed golden potatoes and twice baked potatoes opens up the floor for hesitation and potentially a randomly placed order, the number of options available to you in Jira can cause choice paralysis and missteps that cost you time. This is why the planning process is so important. The planning process is where you take Jira software from being the menu on the right to the menu on the left, done completely chef's choice. While structuring your work is a task and largely the point of this talk, you should know that Jira software's flexibility means you'll be spending more energy molding it to your work structure. And this is why the planning phase is so important. There are no bad options on that menu. Almost everything, except maybe the almond cheese, looks delicious. Jira software is as flexible as you are. While I recommend the Hasselback potatoes, and to be serious, while I recommend the small team-based approach, Jira software could potentially accommodate any of the options that I presented earlier. In my opinion here, the best practice is not which of those options you pick. It's that you pick only one organizational approach, at least to start with. Making that one choice to begin with will help you avoid future choice paralysis. You want to stay consistent about that decision until you're confident in working with Jira. When you've found a work structure approach that fits your needs, stick with that and build off of it. But of course, understand the caveats. You want to poke around in Jira software a bit first, research your alternatives, try not to get drawn into the weeds while you're doing so that you can avoid a configuration fear of missing out. Jira software contains some configurations that are not meant to be stacked. So adding a little bit of this and a little bit of that has the potential to get very weird very quickly. Now we're going to move on to organizing your team. And that starts with understanding it. I'm not implying that you don't know your own team, but you should have a clear-cut understanding of how your team members manage work internally and between teams before you iron in your decision on how your Jira project should be defined. If you're unsure about this, talk about it. Talk to your team. I'm putting emphasis on this because there is no explicit team management function in Jira software. There are some apps in our Atlassian marketplace that will enable team management, and there are some specific settings that you can use to define your team, but Jira software will not lead you through it. So spend whatever time you need to just preparing. I have some questions, again, that you can answer to help define the structure of your team. You're going to want to talk about roles. Who does what, and are those roles aligned with the actual duties? Permissions, what sort of functions will your people need to perform in Jira software to get their work done? And what kind of access do they need? We'll be coming back to this. Who are your team stakeholders, and what kind of visibility do your stakeholders need? Do they need to be Jira users? Will you need an app to display reports to them externally? Also, last but not least, collaboration. If you have multiple teams, will they need to collaborate? And are your teams cross-functional? If you're running an agile shop, the answer to this question is probably yes. If not, I highly recommend taking a look at our Agile microsite, which is just atlassian.com/agile. And once you are certain of the functional roles and groups on your team or teams, you can start to determine what permissions your team members need in Jira software to accomplish their daily work. The most important permissions that you're going to dole out are at the global and project level. And you can consult a full list of permissions in our documentation before doing this in Jira, and I recommend it, but I'm going to review them really quick. Global permissions impact your entire Jira instance. Project permissions are aptly named. They are defined by project. These are the permissions that determine what actions your users can take at the issue level and what they can see. I highly recommend that you assign project permissions to project roles before delegating those project roles to your users. This creates a smooth way to stay organized as your team roles shift and change, because you won't need to go back through every individual permission each time somebody starts a new role. Another approach that you can take to this is to combine project roles and groups. You can assign groups to project roles, and you can assign permissions to groups. If your team structure is a bit complicated and maybe you guys have pods or sub-teams, this will give you some more flexibility to model that more accurately in Jira. You can assign groups to project roles as well as any individual permission in Jira software. There's a lot of options here. Okay, so once you have built a model of your team in Jira software, you can start figuring out how to structure your team's work. Now, if you're not sure of what the big picture of your team's work looks like, this is, again, a great time to discuss it with your team. And I have more questions. These questions will help you figure out how different aspects of your work can be represented in Jira. First of which is issue hierarchy and granularity. How do your tasks scaffold, and how much granularity do you need? You're going to want to also identify processes. Do you already have well-defined work processes in place? And does everybody follow the same one? Do you have different ones for different teams, different processes within one team? You also should identify gaps. And to get an idea of what these are, what led you to trying out Jira software in the first place? Is there anything in particular that's missing in your team's workflow or tooling that if they had it, it would better enable them? Also, how does your team take in new work? Are there defined processes for that? And are there people who take point for particular types of work? Jira software has specific features for most of the aspects of work in that line of discussion. And once you know what you need to build your work structure in Jira, it's time for you to identify the building blocks that you have to work with. We have discussed one building block so far, the project. Once you've considered projects, you should next consider workflows and workflow tools and how you can translate your team's work processes into Jira Software's workflows. In Jira Software Cloud, you'll also want to consider using automation rules alongside your workflows. I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next stage, translating your work. You've done a ton of pre-work at this point, and so an important part of structuring your work for Jira is to save it. It would be a shame to lose the organizational structures that you've just laid out. I'm referring to your new shiny Jira organization system as a codex. And like an actual codex, it should be a simple, documented set of standards describing how you want everything to be kept organized. Now, it could be a set of diagrams that you have saved on your computer. It could be written out as a document. Or you could deliver this in the form of several sample projects. You can define permissions there, add roles and workflows, and then set those projects to be read-only. Then when you want to create new projects based on them, you can just use Jira Software's ability to create a project with shared configuration. And now your codex is a set of sample projects that can serve you as templates. So as a general planning example, let's take a look at two companies who are using Jira software for their project management needs. First, we have Westside Spuds Company. I'm on a potato kick right now. Westside Spuds Company started using Jira as just 4 people in a co-working space. Their team members' roles shifted as needed while the company rolled with the punches to get things done. Everybody was doing multiple jobs. With just a handful of staff, keeping track of who does what in Jira has been a straightforward, and configuration changes just haven't been heavily discussed because they didn't need to be. On the other hand, Global Potate Incorporated has recently grown to a team of several hundred. As roles have become more focused, so have the needs and responsibilities of their users. If they didn't do this already, this would be an ideal time for Global Potate Incorporated to have a central administrator or set of administrators for Jira. Westside Spuds Company and Global Potate Incorporated have both done some preliminary planning for Jira. Westside Spuds Company has defined 2 different project templates to work with that represent 2 different types of work. Because of shifting role definitions, they haven't defined project roles. They've used the default Jira permissions and made everybody a Jira administrator so that anyone can jump in, create projects, make quick changes as necessary without having to ask anybody else. Now, with the bulk of their work revolving around several clients, Westside Spuds Company has organized their projects around those clients. Global Potate Incorporated has taken a different approach for a more complex team arrangement, but they've still decided to keep it simple with just 2 project templates for 2 types of work. But Global Potates Incorporated has more on the line. They're larger, their clients are larger, and have more security concerns. Global Potate has implemented role-based permissions. There are only a few Jira administrators. They did what I said. And they have users who need to use a new project, submit requests for the creation of one, and justify it. More projects can lead to complexity, and they'd like to avoid unnecessary clutter. The way that their cross-functional teams work has persuaded Global Patates Incorporated to set up team-based projects. As Global Patates Incorporated grows, and I guess also as Westside Spuds Company grows, so will their systems, but either approach is working for either company, at least for now. So now we can finally move along to the next phase, translating work into Jira. When you've reached this point, congratulations. That was some degree of effort, but now it should be straightforward to translate your work into Jira software. This is mostly a phase of actions and small decisions on your part, but I'd like to offer a few best practices that might make your life easier based on my experiences and conversations with customers. I mentioned this briefly before, but you're going to want to use more than one project to represent your work. Take advantage of the granularity that Jira software offers by categorizing your work from the top. Other settings will depend on this designation, but like I said, you can create projects with shared configuration. Use consistency to fight confusion. Now, you don't have to translate your work into Jira the exact same way for every project, but your system should at least be used deliberately and consistently. As your team grows and changes, consistency in project tracking will be your friend. New team members will be able to use your codex to self-serve to an extent. And if anybody needs to create new projects or is on the fence about how something should be represented in Jira, your codex is a great reference for them to look back at. Keep permissions in mind while translating and structuring your work. So permissions dictate who can access or edit every aspect of your work items. You want to keep these relationships as simple as they need to be, or rather as complicated as they need to be, err on the side of simplicity. You want these changes that you're going to make as your team grows to be easy to make. At Atlassian, we value the transparency of work, so Jira will not force you to have strict permissions that segment your project's visibility. But you want to align your own permission structure with your team strategy. It's going to be a good idea in the long run. Use automation to simplify your life. Jira Software's advanced workflow features can create automated processes between your development tools and your Jira issues and whatnot. You'll want to use these well because they'll save your team some clicks and time. But outside of workflows, Jira Software Cloud's automation rules can be used to streamline tasks like requesting approval or automatically sending updates, updating issue fields based on other issue fields, or drawing links between related work. The combination of those best practices will help enable collaboration by removing work translation hurdles. They will also reduce your administrative overhead. The less reinventing of the wheel that you have to do as a Jira admin, the better. Also, this system gives context to your issue activity. Jira is an issue tracking solution. So if you've defined a system that guides you and your team's actions, you can take that system and use it alongside with all of the tracked information to understand actions of the past. You'll never be lost about why a certain thing happened. Your system of standards, including your configuration schemes and your saved project templates, are going to be a work in progress, and they will change as you optimize the way you work and learn from past actions. Here, consistency, just remember to balance that consistency with an openness to making changes. So as another example, Westside Spuds Company has now been acquired by Global Patates Incorporated. They work fast. Global Patates, who runs a distributed team with offices on multiple continents, they're familiar with balancing complexity and team variation with consistency in their project management practices. As the two entities are melding, they'll start to encounter a couple differences that they have to resolve. But Global Patates has been keeping up with their system for organizing in Jira. In a side-by-side view, back to that, we can see the major areas where their organizational systems for Jira software have differed. Global Patates has more concerns about data and segmentations of permissions and work. Westside Spuds has put transparency and an immediate ease of use above all else. Neither of these approaches are wrong. When they're ready to merge information into the same Jira software instance, what will happen is Global Potatoes will have the pre-acquisition issues of Westside Spuds available to them, along with all the template projects that will help make them make sense of what has been done in the past. On the flip side, the employees of Westside Spuds Company can onboard into Global Potatoes' system of working in Jira software by referring back to the templated projects and codex. They now have a method for understanding all of the project work that they are now privy to, which saves everyone confusion and explanation time. This way, throughout the transition, Jira software isn't going to be one more thing that gets in their way as Westside Spuds becomes part of or one of Global Potatoes distributed teams. After you have translated your work into Jira, you're off to the races. Project tracking is the chewy nougat center of the Jira platform. And now you're ready for the good stuff. Just as with the translation stage, I'd like to offer some best practices that will help you step up your game, so to speak. My advice in this section is more of a sprinkle on top, and you might not find it useful until you've experimented with intermediate settings. If I were to rank my top advice for Jira software users, I would say the top one is to keep it simple. But my number 2 piece of advice is that you master JQuery. JQuery stands for Jira Query Language. It's our text-based search language. Most of the features that help you track work in Jira software will rely on JQuery in some fashion. Knowing how to form a JQuery statement that retrieves exactly the data that you want will enable you to mold things like dashboard gadgets and advanced roadmaps, plans, and board visuals to your exact needs. Wield boards wisely. So if you've decided to have each project represent the work of a single team, this might not be relevant to you, but it could. Just so that you're aware, you can create multiple boards under a single project, and you can have multiple projects be fed into a single board. Your board filters can be changed to encompass cross-project tracking, sprints, and reporting. But use this with caution. It can get messy, and as I said in the beginning, just because you can doesn't mean you should. My next piece of advice is to utilize dashboards, especially as mission control for distributed teams if it's relevant to you. Dashboards are great for providing a clean overview of multiple streams of data, and that's especially useful to people with distributed teams. It can be set up so that it's the first thing that your teams see when they log in, like a friendly global update. You can also have individual dashboards for particular people. And these can serve as mission control for team management. Unlike the reports that you'll see in your boards in Jira software, dashboard reports display data in real time. Another thing to remember is that permissions control this dashboard, so anybody who doesn't have a project or global permission to see something or do something can't see it or do it in the dashboard either. Any users with which you have shared the dashboard and its filters will be able to view it as long as those other permissions are also there. Dashboard reports are less robust than board reports, but dashboard reports are heavily influenced by JQuery filters, and those control their usefulness and customizability. Now, next piece of advice. Some messes are hard to undo. You don't want to end up in a situation where you have 5 custom fields with similar names, which only differ by ID. So you're going to want to create custom fields and labels sparingly. Labels can be useful in issue searches and reports, but when anybody can make them and you can create a new label anytime by just making a typo of a previous label, that means that they can grow in number and broaden in purpose uncontrollably while the context for each of them is lost. The point is that the more of these that you have, the harder it is to align your teams on them and to generate meaningful reports that involve these. And that's all. Thank you for sticking with me through this. And I've gone over a variety of general best practices and strategies for working with Jira. I hope that they prove useful to you. And it sounds obvious, but planning out how your team will use and represent itself in Jira is your best first step. Treating your translation of work into Jira should just be any other translation. Know the target Jira structures that you want to move into before you start the moving, and build a codex or a system of work translation that you and your users can refer to stay consistent and organized. Your configuration and tracking needs are going to change with time. So at any point, you can use the strategies that I've given you along with your codex to keep the task of effective Jira administration from becoming worthy of needing its own issue tracker. And that's all.
Woo. Thank you, Ijoma. That was amazing. And we had a few people pop in and out during the session, but now it's just you and me. And my only question is, like, when can I visit your potato shop? Like, it sounds amazing.
You know, as I was coming up with that menu, I thought to myself, I'm very hungry, but also maybe one day might do the food truck thing. It looks interesting.
Honestly, after quarantine, I think it goes. If you weren't,
everybody
if you
will
weren't
be eager
such an
for
expert at Jira,
potatoes.
yeah.
That's true. Give Jira advice and make specialty potatoes on the side.
So funny. You'll be like catering summit in 2022.
It's a booth, but it's also a food truck.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I love it. Thank you again. That was incredible and like such valuable content. So really thank you.
Yeah, welcome. I'm glad to be able to put it out there. And a lot of this is information that I've tried to give people in pieces throughout my interactions with customers. And there's just not a place to reference all of them in one go. So now there
Totally.
is.
Now there is, yes. I'll send you the recording as soon as it's live. Thanks again.
Awesome.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
All right. Bye.